What's up, SciFam? It's your boy Nickel.
And today, we're going to learn about the differences between digital and analog signals. So as you can see, we'll look at the pros and cons of digital, the pros and cons of analog, and then we'll look at how we are currently using digital and analog signals to transmit information. We'll finish off with this extra science notebook page, which is going to be printed so that we can then use these different grids here to make some drawings, some digital drawings and some analog drawings. So to begin with, it's important to understand the fact that information can be shared in two different ways. One is, well, using digital, and if you're sharing information, we usually call that a transmission. So you can transmit information. Here it can be a digital transmission, or you can have an analog transmission. We'll go ahead and understand the differences, or we'll describe the differences between digital and analog. So let's start with the digital, which I spelled that wrong. So it's just D-I-G-I-T-A-L, digital transmissions. Let's start with those. All right, digital transmissions is when information, like some type of message that you want to send, like "What's up, SciFam? It's your boy Nickel," can be converted into some type of binary code. Now, the word binary, there is such thing as binary code, but binary just means that you have two options. So, for example, you could think about an example of this could be a light switch. So if you have a light switch and that's all you have in order to share some type of message, well, you can make a code that's like, okay, 3 ons in a row means letter A. 2 ons and 1 off is the letter G, or whatever you want to do, but the light switch can only be on or off. So you can think about how you can use the patterns of on and off in order to make some type of code. Another popular code is one that I used in the definition here, which is binary code. And binary code is just a series of zeros and ones. And based on how many zeros in a row or how many ones in a row or how many combinations of zeros and ones you have, it ends up being a code that can be used to decipher to understand some type of message. And another famous one is Morse code. Morse code is a series of dots and lines. So let's take a look real quick at what it would sound like if you used dots and lines to say, "What's up, SciFam?" So there it is, there's my input, and if I hit play, it's gonna play the dot, line, dot, 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 line, dot, dot, dot. The slash means we have a new word. So that first part to the left of that slash is all what's. The next dots and lines is up. The next section of dots and lines in between the slashes is sci, and last one is fam. So let's hear what that would sound like if someone were to send you a Morse code message. All right, and there you have it. What's up, SciFam? So let's go back to our note page. And now that we can see that there's light switches, binary code, and even Morse code, which just has the dot and dashes to communicate information, we can look at how this can be a positive thing to have digital transmission. Also, it can be a negative thing. Well, first off is that it's a very reliable way in order to transmit information. Because if it's a dot or a dash, well, it's pretty obvious what type of noise you're hearing. And if it's a binary code, a 0 or 1, it's pretty obvious either a 0 or a 1 is the choice of the code. So it's a very reliable way to transmit information. And it's easy to replicate or to make a copy of the code. It's easy to replicate with a high level of accuracy. So if you got a message of Morse code, you could just repeat that exact same Morse code, and no matter how many times you repeated it, that message would just continually be repeated very, very reliably. So we have our pros. Those are the positives. The negatives, the cons, the things that make it a little bit more challenging of a type of code is that it doesn't capture the subtleties. And this is a kind of weird word. The things that are less obvious, the subtleties in the information. It doesn't capture the subtleties, because if I say, "What's up, SciFam?" or "What's up, SciFam?" There's different inflection in my voice. And yes, the digital signal, the digital transmission can repeat my message, but it doesn't quite get the inflection in my voice. So some of those subtle things are harder to convey with digital transmissions. The other type of transmission we have is analog transmissions. Analog transmissions are going to be anything that has a continuous spectrum of information. So you can think about a rainbow. A rainbow is a continuous spectrum of color. Yes, we say there's red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, but in between all those colors, there's an even different gradation of colors. And if you zoom into a rainbow, you would never see a break from one color to the next. It's just a continuous flow of colors, and we end up identifying the differences. But an analog is anything where there's that continuous spectrum. So this could be anything like with sight. It's not like you like see it or you don't. It's like, well, maybe it's a little blurry, maybe it's really clear, maybe it's far away, maybe it's close. When we see things, it's not just we see it or we don't. There's a lot of different ways in which we see it. It could be bright or dark. So we could even think about brightness. You know, if you have a light bulb, yes, it can be on and off, but it could also only be like 10% bright, 20% brightness, 50% brightness, 75% brightness. So there's a whole spectrum of brightness. We can also think about sound. That could be the level of sound, like the volume of sound, how loud it is or how quiet it is or whatever it is in between. Or it could even be like the pitch of the sound. It could be really, really high pitch or really low pitch sound. And it could be anything in between. Another thing that we could think about here is smell. It's not like you just smell it or you don't. There's a lot of different qualities of smell. And also, the smell can change as you get closer or further from something. Thank goodness, right? Anyway, a positive of this, one of the pros of having analog transmissions is that it easily captures the subtleties in the information because it uses a spectrum. It's not just like on or off, it's not so rigid, but there's a lot of flow of information that can be used. The things that then make it not so beneficial, the cons, is that it's actually hard to copy it with a high level of accuracy. And there's a continuous decrease in the quality of the transmission as you continuously copy. So we could say continuous copies decrease in quality. Now, what I mean by that is if I were to say, yo, what's up, SciFam? And someone tried to repeat me saying that, their voice might be a little bit different. The inflection in their voice might be a little different. So if they then told it to somebody else and that person told it to someone else and that person told it to someone else, eventually that message might get changed. That's the whole idea of telephone. In the game telephone, you're using an analog transmission where there's a continuous spectrum. And it's hard to copy with a high level of accuracy. In the game telephone, it's easy that the last person doesn't have a clear understanding of the original message. If we used a digital transmission in telephone, it wouldn't be as fun because you just say 5, 5, 5, 5. If everyone knew it was one number or another, or on or off, it wouldn't be as hard to mess it up. So analog transmissions, they easily capture the subtleties, but they're harder to copy. Now, if we think about like what modern day transmissions of information look like, modern day transmission of information. Essentially what ends up happening today is that we have these really great digital ways to transmit information. And that's great because we can put music into a file, a digital file, for example. We don't have to have an actual tape recording or record recording of the actual sound. Instead, we can turn it into a digital type of file format that can then be transmitted into the output, and the output is going to be analog because when we hear that digital noise, it gets transmitted through and it gets transferred through technology in order to make some type of, let's say we're thinking about music. Well, it doesn't start as a digital transmission because you have to have someone actually singing it. So when someone's singing it, what they do is they're singing their song, and we have an analog type of information, which is singing, or someone's voice, their pitch, and it gets turned into, using really, really high-tech equipment, into a digital format. That digital format is what we then hold in our pockets if we have like an MP3 player, for example. That MP3 player then transmits that digital information into our headphones, where we then listen and we get the analog information as the output. So there's a lot of situations that are analog that get converted into digital and then get back converted into analog, so we can understand them and we can actually have those subtleties in the information. So let's then do a little drawing example to understand the differences between digital and analog. So in this first drawing, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to list a series of boxes. And when I list these boxes, I want you to color in the box. So for the first three, for example, are A10. So go ahead and color in A10, A11, and A12. So you see how I colored those in when I said those? So I want you to continue to color in the following boxes: B5, B10, C6, C7, C8, C9, C10, D6, D10, E6, E7, E10, and E11. So make sure you have all of those colored in. And that will then help you answer what you just drew. And then it might be actually kind of hard because, like we said earlier about digital signals, is that digital signals are tough to show subtlety. So I'll explain what it is you drew here in a few minutes. Well, actually, I should just tell you. You just drew a horse. So let's draw an analog horse down here, though, to show what a horse could actually look like if we were to draw it using a continuous spectrum. So instead of just using boxes, I can then use lines that can go anywhere I want them to go. They don't have to just fill out the boxes, and that's really great. So there's my horse with the tail sticking out. And with this digital or this analog type of drawing, we can see that looks better than my digital. But even if you think about it, if we could actually make these boxes even smaller, then we wouldn't even have to fill in a whole box. We could even have more accurate information. So like your TV, for example, has a bunch of pixels. Well, a pixel is just how many boxes there are per square inch in your TV. So that would be a 4 pixel situation. But if I were to separate all of those into quarters, now all of a sudden I have a 16 pixel. So you can see I went from 4 to 16, and the more and more pixels you have, the better resolution you can have in your digital drawing. The analog drawing down here, wow, that's a weird looking horse, but I was trying to draw a horse. You can see that subtlety that I couldn't actually get in that digital drawing. So here, let's try one more. This time, we're going to draw a wave. Okay, so listen up. It starts in A1, up here in the top left corner. Next would be B2, C3, D3, E4, D5, C5, B6, A7, B8, C9, D10, E11, E12, D13, C13, B14, A14, A15, B16, C17, D17, E18. So you just drew a wave. And now down here in the bottom, we can show what that wave would look like if we were doing an analog drawing. So here we drew a wave. So you can see the differences here between digital and analog drawings. Analog drawings, like we said in the pros here, is that analog drawings easily captures the subtleties. Digital drawings are not as good at capturing the subtleties, but they're easier to replicate. So that's why we both have the exact same digital drawings, but I bet we both drew our horses different in the analog version. So digital is an easier way to transfer information, whereas analog information has more subtlety to it, which makes it a little bit more artistic and rich with showing the complexities of being human. So these are the main differences between digital and analog signals. I'll catch you on the next video.